was a member of the Western. Pardon?
It's recording.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know when I'm starting and I'm not. Oh, when did you? There, we get there.
Yeah, the microphone is still closed.
I think the owl also follows movement, so if people can be still, except for Gary, it'll swivel to him, I think.
Okay. I was asked to speak about the Ulster Project in Oak Ridge. First, a little bit of background. The Ulster Project was set up to address the problems that occurred in Ireland and in Northern Ireland that accumulated over a period of some 300 years by that point, and a great difficulty between the native Irish Catholic people largely, and people from Scotland who had come, Scotland, England, who had come and inhabited in the north, largely Protestant people, to go through fighting and wars and stuff. It's just, it's beyond me. But these things carried on down into the 20th century and culminated in some times called the Troubles in Northern Ireland, in which Catholics and Protestants actively fought one another. Paramilitary groups were set up, secret paramilitary groups, to assassinate leaders of the other side. Communities were walled off, literally walled off from one another. It was a terrible situation. Catholic children went to Catholic school, Protestant children went to Protestant schools. They didn't interact, they didn't know one another, they had never seen one another except perhaps in the downtown center. It was an almost complete apartheid between Catholics and Protestants, with a tremendous amount of hatred between the two. Into this mess stepped a man by the name of Kerry Waterstone. His nickname was Kerry, his real name was Albert. Waterstone was a Southern Irish Protestant minister, a rare bird. He was a citizen of Ireland, Southern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, that had broken away from England in the 1920s after a civil war. He was a Protestant minister and had gone to seminary with all of the Protestant ministers, many of them up in the north. As a consequence, he had a foot in both camps, as it were. He came over to the United States in, I think, 1975 in a pulpit exchange program with an Episcopal minister in Connecticut. And he came over here with several children in tow. His kids came back to him and said, "Nobody knows who's Protestant and who's Catholic." And he was thunderstruck, as they were. And he said, "How is that?" And he said, "Well, they just don't know. They don't pay any attention to that sort of thing." He was just absolutely thunderstruck. And he went out and looked it over and discovered that this was not a matter of any kind of even serious thought on most American kids. And he went back to Ireland and said, "Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could bring a bunch of Irish kids over here, Northern Irish kids, to the United States and expose them to this kind of culture?" Now, in order to do such a thing, in Northern Ireland in that day, you had to have approval from the ecclesiastical authorities on both sides of the religious fence. Kerry was a Protestant. He went to the Protestant ministers up there, and they liked the idea. He went to the Catholic bishop up there, and he was sold on it too. So what he did, he established what he called the Ulster Project. And this is to take kids from Ulster. I have a map, and I don't know how to, I'll show it to the folks here, I don't know about the folks, on Zoom. This is a map of Ireland, okay? The Republic of Ireland, a separate country, is down here. This is Northern Ireland, and this is the section of Ireland that was part of the United Kingdom. When the Republic of Ireland left the United Kingdom after a revolution, these people up here who were largely Protestants and largely loyal to the British throne demanded to have a separate area for themselves, and that was done. The problem being that once the borders were set up, not everybody was in agreement with how that should come about. Not everybody was in agreement with having the island of Ireland divided off like that. Okay, so Kerry got the kids from Northern Ireland. He would go to churches up there and ask the people in the churches, who are the teenagers in this church that you think are likely to become leaders in the future? And the ministers could name them off right away. And he did this in Catholic churches, Protestant churches, and he got groups of half girls and half boys. And he said, okay, now I want these kids to go to the United States. He got groups of people over in the United States that would set up a program here for the kids when they came over. Where the kids from Northern Ireland would stay in the homes of Americans of the same religion. It's very important to have to be done that way. And then said, okay, so that's the setup, what happened. The Ulster Project started in the US. As I say, in about 75, 76, thereabouts, it started coming on over. I got involved in it when a man named Richard Burns came to Oak Ridge and wanted to set up an Ulster Project there. Richard is Catholic, and he told us about how this needed to be done. The basic idea, is to bring these Irish kids over here into American families and give them about a month's worth of a lot of teenage fun, plus a chance to get to know one another, plus a chance to look across the divide, which they literally couldn't do down there, to be with kids who are of the other religion, and horror of horrors, to go to the other religion's church. You could get shot for that in Ireland, Northern Ireland. You could literally be shot. And so their parents were told beforehand, this is the kind of stuff the kid's going to have to go through. And so as a consequence, the kids that Kerry got were kids that were from the more liberal families, the more accepting families that would allow such a radical thing to happen. And there were also, as I mentioned before, kids that were likely to become leaders in the future, is what everybody hoped. Okay, they came over here, and we had to do over here, it was an enormous work. I don't minimize it in any way. We had to pay for their fare over here. For the rich Americans, we had the money. We would gather the money, pay for the airfare over here. We would set up a month-long program. We would find kids of the same sex and same religion in homes they could stay with for this 1 month time. We developed a program where scheduling off not only church visits and things like this, but all kinds of good teenage fun, swimming, and things of this nature. And then we had some rather serious kinds of encounters. It's difficult to explain, but the idea behind them was to break down the barriers and have kids interact with one another on an entirely different level. And all of this stuff required a tremendous amount of work on our part. We had to set the whole thing up and whatnot. And then we would bring the kids over, and I'll kind of go through a kind of a typical month of what we did, and it is still going on, by the way. And what we do, we meet them at the airport, and there'd be all these kids coming off a plane, bleary-eyed and jet-lagged, dressed in woolen sweaters, coming into an East Tennessee July. And I'd say, you're not gonna need that sort of room. We come out of the air-conditioned airport and go. They get in the unair-conditioned school bus and ride on up to Oak Ridge from the Knoxville Airport. And astonished at all of the new things about it, all the funny people out there, and the strange events that went on. And everything was new and bizarre. When they came to Oak Ridge, we had it set up so that the Oak Ridge band would play something when they came on in the school parking lot, a big welcome, and they loved that. Then they would be assigned to their host families. Protestant girls would go to Oak Ridge families where they had a Protestant girl, and they would, stay in those families like that. They'd be all signed up, and they'd go out to their homes. And they'd come back together, and we would start out with, we'd have introductions around with everybody. You describe, who you were, where you're from, what you did. And we would try to get them off to some kind of really fun things to start off, like, for instance, swimming. And about the third or fourth day, the predominant odor in the air would be of solar cane, because these poor Irish kids, these fair, half of them red-headed, Irish kids. And some of them were so burned it was painful to look at. And they had to be told, be careful about the sun, be sure to put on sunscreen and this sort of thing. You have all of these sorts of things. And then we would go into, I'll give you a description of one of the programs we had to kind of loosen things up. We had some teachers and principals in the Oak Ridge schools that had a kind of side business where they did, where they worked with people in companies largely to try to break down barriers, and try to enable them to communicate more better with one another. This included silly little things that they would do. They would be given crazy little tasks, for instance, to construct something that was very difficult to construct. And they'd have funny little pieces and parts to do it, and everybody would run in and try to do it. And one kid would say, oh, no, here, walk this, and that didn't work. And some other kid would come in and say, well, how about if you put that up there? And I guess so. And somebody else would come in, and in time they would learn that they had to do all these things together. It'll work better. It worked better if you don't have one guy who takes charge of the whole mess and charges through the end. It works better with everybody working together. Everybody can contribute something. That sweet little girl sitting over here weighs, 85 pounds or something like that. She knows how to get that dumb thing up there. If need be, she can get it up there. And set it up. She knows that, and you have all these different. You realize people have different talents and different abilities, and they're very much individual. They have nothing to do with religion. That's a big learning point. They have trust exercises. One of the things that they would do, you guys have maybe heard about sorts of things. One of the things they would do, they had everybody together, standing facing one another, holding their hands up like this. And one kid would be stationed over here with his back to them, facing that way. And he would be told, fall backwards, we'll catch you. There's a fair amount of trust in that. Sometimes they put somebody laying down underneath them from the bottom and say, we'll catch him before you hit him. They say, don't fold. Don't go into a folded sitting position. It's murder to catch you under that. You've got to fall flat. Think about it. About 50–60% of the time they would fold, and it would be murder to catch it. And you catch them just before they hit somebody. These are kind of trust building exercises. And it would break down a lot of the barriers between them, and they go back home and change. Okay, that and the swimming and all kinds of silly stuff. And sometimes they would be, the American hosts would take them out to see, for instance, out to Kate's Cove, see real live deer, and maybe real live bears, live American bears up there, wild bears. Sometimes they would take them across the mountain over to Cherokee, and they'd see real Indians, real live American Indians over there. And it was a big thing to them. It was a new world, an entirely new world. All of this changed them. There were many cities involved in the Ulster Project. So I think at one point they had something like 30 or so cities involved in this. And in Tennessee, we had several. We had the Oak Ridge Ulster Project, Knoxville Ulster Project, one in the Tri-Cities. We had Ulster Project down in Chattanooga. We had Ulster Project in Nashville. I can't recall if we ever did set up anything in Memphis. I'm not certain about. But we had a number of them, and there were other Ulster projects scattered all over the United States. Very large of them would come over during the summers and try to see how things are going and help things along. And his ability to smooth things over, to set these programs up, and to help people go along was just phenomenal. He was not a very large man, and he had an Irish gift of Blarney that was, it was amazing. Let me tell you one little thing. He would always come in and they'd say, well, what's your position in this? And he says, well, he said, I'd say I'm a doggerist. It's rather like a cactus, but friendlier. Things would go from there. Kerry was phenomenal, and he had phenomenal powers of persuasion. He persuaded all kinds of folks all over Northern Ireland where people were shooting each other. He persuaded people down in the South, to help along in this thing. He was amazing. He set up these projects. We would run the projects in the summer, and then often there would be a gathering of Ulster projects in the United States, where we would all people that were working on them would come together and we exchange information, see how it was done, and have ideas and something like this. Okay, this ran in Oak Ridge, it ran from mid-80s, 84, 85, and it's still going now. The Oak Ridge Ulster Project merged with the Knoxville Ulster Project 2 years ago, and things are still continuing. There have been between 10 and 15,000 kids in Northern Ireland gone through this project. Kerry's original hope was that none of those kids would end up in the paramilitaries. None of them did. And he knew that the teenage years were the years in which they would be recruited for this sort of thing. And he had to get to them first, and he did. He got him over here, and the teenage years, and the upper teens in particular, is when you develop your sense of yourself, when you discover the world, when you see what's around. And it is pretty much the last chance that you have to get to somebody and change things drastically. Kerry knew that, and it worked out beautifully. This went along until 25 years ago. There was a peace accord in Ireland, Northern Ireland. The Good Friday Accord, I think 25 years ago, just a couple of days ago, they got the warring factions together, basically signed a peace accord, agreed to try to govern the country together, And they did.
Coffee.
And they did, amazingly. Now, things are not totally smooth, and not completely smooth. My wife and I went to Northern Ireland in 2009. This is 11 years after the peace agreement had been signed. And in many senses, the neighborhoods, the Catholic and Protestant neighborhoods look much alike. The Protestant neighborhoods had murals painted on the sides of buildings, like 2 stories tall, with slogans, for instance, or with pictures of things that had happened. Likewise, in the Catholic sections, they had the same sort of thing. Often there were what they called peace walls between the communities, and these were huge things. They're like 12 feet tall, maybe with heavy mesh wiring up above that, 6, 8, 10 feet. The idea being that somebody couldn't come along and throw a Molotov cocktail over it to the other side of the mesh or catch it. Those things are still there. They were still in place at that time, but the shooting and the killing had died back profoundly. And it has to this day. Okay, this is the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Accords. And President Biden's over there for this. And of course, a lot of newspaper reporters are over there running around seeing what had happened. And I read an article 2 days ago, I think the New York Times, this reporter that went over there, and she said, they're horrible. She said, oh my goodness, she said, only in 30% of the schools do they have kids of different religions. And I thought, 30%? Oh, you know, it went from 0, it went from, 100% of the kids who were going to separated schools to 30%. Whoa. The progress was profound. And so that's the story of the Ulster Project. It's a little bit scattered, I know, and I'm not a particularly systematic speaker of any sort, and I have a bunch of handouts that I give to you that you can look over afterward that I've written up. I write an autobiography for my kids, and I've written up all sorts of stuff. And I have material here that I wrote up about the Ulster Project, mashed together into 2 things, both the need for it, and the organization of it, and what we actually did. I think that this will probably tell you in far more organized fashion what I did here and what I told you here. So that's what it. Anybody have any questions about this? I perhaps have been my usual scattered self. Oh my goodness, that answered everybody's questions. Okay, well, thank you very much. And
You started to be very begin with, to get you to begin to be there.
that question was what started me to be involved in it at the very beginning. Richard Burns, the guy that started it in Oak Ridge, had a meeting at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church to talk about this. And I don't recall, was Kerry there at the time? No, Kerry was not there at that initial meeting yet. And I thought, this is a profound thing. This is a wonderful opportunity for peacemaking, to bring these 2 warring factions together in some small way. And so I became involved listening to that. And Kerry came by, I think some weeks later, and gave another little talk to us, and that really cemented it to me. I was involved with the Questions with Friends meeting at the time. And this very much fit my pacifist look on the world. So that's how I got involved in it. It was not a matter of our kids at the time were tiny, 5 and 6 and 7, something like that. And so the kids are involved, and it was just kind of a call.
This is Gary Farlow on Zoom. Can you hear me? Oops. When I've once heard you talk about this before, you said that in a summary session with a group that had gathered together, you commented that the kids got it. They really understood what was going on, but they really weren't sure they could take it back home. Could you comment a little more on that?
Yeah, they knew full well, how conditions were back then. They would go back home to segregated schools. They would go back home to kids that would be perhaps interested and kind of thrilled. Hey, you're in this crazy foreign country of America. What's it like over there? One of the things that Kerry said is that the Irish generally had a very high opinion of us. Totally undeserved. But they did, and so kids paid a great deal of attention to that sort of thing. The kids then would be able to say to their very close friends, I got to know Sheehan O'Connor over there. He's Sheehan O'Connor. What's Catholic? I'm at the night over in the U.S. But he's Catholic. You know, I still got to know the guy. It's just a bad kid. And these sorts of things happened all over. And I think gradually, as these people grew up and had kids themselves, they started to want their kids to go to integrated schools. They knew the things that they faced in going back to Northern Ireland. And of course they were uncertain, of course they were scared, of course they didn't know what they would do. They did what they needed to do in going through life. And they were an example to the other people around them, the kids that they went to school with and they grew up with. And these kids did become, in many senses, leaders. There's a man who's a member of parliament. I can't recall if he's in the British Parliament or if he's in the Northern Ireland Parliament. He was an Ulster Project kid, and he said this was a formative thing for him. He went to a Ulster Project in Wisconsin in 1980. This was a very formative thing for him. There are many other people like that, and they changed the world by simply being different. They didn't have to say, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. They became different, and they were seen as different, and I think that's the change that occurred. I think that's how they did it. That answer your question, or did I confuse everything?
I'm wondering, I'm sorry, Patricia Thomas over here. Is the format and the finances and all that, is it still a perpetuating, go out and ask for money kind of thing, or is there some foundation who's maybe helping out here?
There was a bit of a division among the Ulster projects at the very start. A couple of them in Connecticut, I think, were funded by a foundation. The rest of us weren't. We just went out and scrambled for the money every year. We'd give talks to churches, we'd give talks to civic organizations, we beg our money any way we could. And I think that's pretty much how it has maintained. I need to tell you that after the Good Friday Agreement, an awful lot of Ulster projects in the United States, okay, project's over, everything's solved. It's not completely, but it was a big step. A few have continued on, including the Ulster Project in Oak Ridge and Knoxville, which merged a few years ago. During the pandemic, nobody did anything, of course. I think in 2022, the Oak Ridge Ulster Project with the Knoxville Ulster Project brought a few kids over. And they continued, and they're working on doing it again this year. So they're continuing. And it's the same kind of a thing that we were doing back in the 80s. Exactly the same kind of a thing. Entirely different folks that I don't even know. But it's, they're continuing it on. If there are no particular other questions on this, it was a marvelous idea. And the idea to change fight that has carried on for 300 years by changing the kids. You don't go to the adults and say, you shouldn't fight like you've always fought all the time because it's not good. They'll fight. You go to the kids, you change the kids, and you can make a little bit of a difference. They will then grow up and go into positions of power. And this is how it's always been. If you think back about the formative experiences you had when you were younger, those are the ones that changed. Those are the ones that turned your direction in one particular way or another. And it's the way things are. It's the way we're built. And Kerry Waterstone decided that this was the time in people's lives that you could get to them and change them. Beyond that, things got kept right set in concrete. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll pass these out. This is probably all the stuff that I didn't get to.
Thank you.